ICQ Podcast, episode 333. Ham Celebrate Healthcare Heroes. Well, hello, fellow Amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 333rd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Scott McDonald, KA9 Papa, Amory Nugent, EI9 Kilo Whiskey, and David LeBlanc, Kilo Foxtrot 7, Juliet Alpha Foxtrot, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin, M1MRB, is joined by Leslie, Golf 0, Charlie India Bravo, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Edmund, Mike 0, Mike November Golf, to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature of hams celebrating our healthcare heroes during these times in 2020. Well, as always, it's your very kind donations that keep us advert-free on the show. And along with our monthly and annual subscription donors, we'd like to thank the following one-off donors. First off, David LeBlanc, KF7, Juliet Alpha Foxtrot, says has been listening for a few years now. He couldn't quite find less than a length of coax, and he figured the shipping would be prohibitive anyway, so he used PayPal instead to drop us a line. Regards to Martin, Mrs. B, and the group. Keep up the good work. Thanks for all your hard work in keeping going for over 300 episodes. So that's from David, KF7, Juliet Alpha Foxtrot. Thank you very much there for your very kind message. Scott McDonald, KA9 Papa, and his wife Sarah sends a message. Sorry to miss you guys at National Hamfest this year. Hoping that Dayton and the UK Hamfest will be going ahead in 2021. Stay healthy. Keep up the good work. You've got the best team in ham radio podcasting. Thank you very much, Sarah and Scott. It's a pleasure to hear you continue to enjoy the show, and thank you very much for your very kind words. Amory Nugent is our last one off donor this episode to thank. Her call sign, Echo India 9 Kilo Whiskey. And Amory says, just donated for your 12th birthday. Previously donated about a year ago when she first started learning about radio and was finding the ICQ podcast very informative. And listened to a whole year worth of podcasts in only a few months, and was learning a lot along the way. Want to acknowledge your help with my very steep learning curve. You're more than welcome, Anne-Marie. I know myself and the team, it certainly does warm us to know that we're helping people get into our fantastic hobby. So anyway, over the last year, Anne-Marie has studied for the Irish HAREC exam and passed it with the Morse code as well. That will make Dan very happy, and Dan's be coming up in a few moments recently. And now I have a full class 1 license here in Ireland. She's a member of the Limerick Clare Amateur Radio Club and really enjoying her radio despite these strange times we're in. Thanks for all the fascinating stories you highlight every fortnight. So, Amory, you're more than welcome, and many congratulations there on your call sign, EI9 Kilo Whiskey. Now, those donations, as they keep us advert free, they also as well keep us investing in the show. And I'm sure you're appreciating, guys, the new subscription service we're using for recording the show, hopefully making the audio quality better, and the new microphones we bought for some of the guys. That's where your donations go. If you'd like to continue to help us out and keep the show advert free and help us continue to improve, all you need to do is visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where whatever value you find in the show, pop along and pop it into a PayPal or use your credit card details there. Send it along to us, and it'll help us grow the show. Right, now we're going to join Martin, Leslie, Dan and Edmund to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including the FCC to start charging hams, and International Space Station is launching a crossband repeater. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well, hi guys. Welcome to episode 333 of the ICQ podcast, and tonight's news roundtable for that episode. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB. Hi,
Good
Leslie.
evening, Martin. Good evening, Martin.
Good
We
evening.
were just having a giggle there, but never mind. Let's go with it. Thank you for inviting me again.
Yeah, life's always a giggle. Come on, this is the podcast. You know, many of our listeners suggest that we have too much fun. I dispute that.
We can't afford fun.
No, we can. Oh dear. If I move across the pond, I also have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, gents.
Are you going to try and keep us under control tonight, Dan?
I've given up on that.
A wise move. And moving back to the UK, we have Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
How you doing?
All right, thank you. How are you doing?
We're ducking and diving. We saw you the other week.
Yes, and I will say thank you for that at the end of the round table.
Yeah, we'll just keep people interested in what went on, but good to see you the other week. Right, let's look at our news stories this time round. And first news story, the ARRL has just elected a new CEO. Now, I think it's great they've now got somebody back in charge. The person takes over on the 28th of September, so not long to wait. The gentleman, David Minster, NA2AA, so NA2AA, and let's see how he does. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I haven't really been researching this too much, trying to get any inside info, but from the announcement, I like a couple of things. First, he's an active amateur radio operator, unlike the previous two gentlemen. And second, of course, he's a CW operator.
Well, as a CW operator, that'll certainly be something you'll enjoy.
Yeah. No, but I do think I've heard from somebody, I forget who, that, he has a lot of management experience, which is good. And like I say, he's an active amateur radio operator. So, I think we'll have to see, of course, but I think this will be good. And he's moving to Connecticut. I think that was also mentioned, which shows a certain amount of commitment. So that's good, too.
Yeah, and reading through the release, they talk about him also being a member of AMSAT, and he has special interest in satellite, digital communications, remote operation, and ham radio computing, so including software. So that's also, it looks so he's got quite a wide breadth of interest in our hobby, which I suggest somebody at the top needs to have a good understanding of the whole lot.
Yep.
Leslie, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, my thoughts, it's a key role to move the organisation forward, and it looks like they've got a really good guy in. And you know what? I'm open-minded about it. Let's go. I mean, I'm a member of the ARRL, and I want it to succeed. Good luck. Let's see what happens. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that Frank is going to get us some interviews, which is good on this one.
Please, he'll be more than welcome.
Yeah. Well, let's see what he has to say. Edmund, I don't believe you're a member of the ARRL or haven't been, but what's your thoughts on this?
Indeed, I'm not a member of the ARRL, but like Leslie, I would like it to succeed because that's in all our interests. So I wish this gentleman well, even though I don't know him personally, and in common with practically every radio amateur in the States, I haven't worked him on the air. But it's nice to see he's been in the hobby a long time. He's been licensed as long as I've been alive. I'm not going to give my age away, though. And he does have a wide variety of interests as outlined on his QRZ.com page, which is also a very positive sign. And he's a CW man, and not only does he do CW, he collects keys, so I read. So he's already gone up in my estimation already. Best of luck with the job. It's a hell of an undertaking, and it's not something that I would dare to have a go at, even if I were being paid a very large salary. So kudos to him for taking the role on, and I wish him the very best of luck.
Yeah, I think we're mutual on wishing David Minster, NA2AA, the best of luck, and let's see what you come up with, David. We wish you all the best for the future. And Edmund, I didn't realise you're a year younger than Colin. Hi. So Colin would have been a year old when David took his first licence, got his novice licence. So if you're listening, Colin, you got a little while to go before you have to go for the next one. Hi. Moving on. We've covered a number of these stories, but I still look at it and go, wow, every time I see them. Transatlantic opening between the Canary Islands and the Caribbean. Edmund, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, this is extremely impressive because the distance of one of the contacts was, in round figures, somewhere near 5,250 kilometres, which equates to 5 miles is 8 kilometres, so 3,000 and a bit, 3,250-ish miles on 2 meters. That is a considerable achievement, and I think that is probably somewhere towards the upper distance that's achievable via a tropospheric duct. I don't think you can go much further than that. So congratulations to all who are involved, and I have nothing in particular for or against FT8, but I'm very pleased to read that SSB was involved in at least some of these contacts as well, and the fact that there were FT8 contacts as well kind of consolidates the SSB contact, or confirms it, I should say, because if the SSB contact happened to be extremely marginal, then there's possibly slight room for doubt if you've copied the call sign correctly and that kind of thing. But if you've got an FT8 contact as well down the same path to the same station, then that adds an extra layer of reassurance, if you like. So these are mind-boggling distances, and there I was thinking that my QSO into Sweden at about 650 miles was quite good. But my only other question, I suppose, is, can they do better? I will watch with interest.
Well, you know what us amateurs are like, Edmund. Whatever you do, you're always looking for something a bit better. You could have the best antenna up today, but it doesn't stop you looking for a better one tomorrow. And I think we're always chasing some form of record, and this is phenomenal. And I hope they do better, but this is phenomenal. Leslie, what do you think?
Well, when I was reading this article, my jaw dropped. I'm not into FT8 at all, but those sort of distances on VHF SSB, you're kidding. I think those textbooks I had that said VHF was only short distance only, I think they need to be designated to the dustbin, because these totally blown that out of the water. Well done, guys. Keep it up. Great work.
Yeah, and I used to get excited when I did sort of 70, 80 miles on VHF. But they're in a different league to me. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think we need to, since we've covered this so much, I think we need to, maybe talk with these guys and see what they attribute their success to. Is it better equipment? Is it odd propagation conditions, or better tropospheric ducting prediction, or what is it? And we should maybe delve a little bit further into why they're all of a sudden setting records.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'd like to extend the offer out to the guys. I'll write to them at the end of the show. But
I think it'll make a cracking interview, Martin. It really would.
Yeah, I think so. And we don't know. They might be up on top of a mountaintop, which would give them some advantage. Not a 3,000 mile advantage, but certainly, we do know that VHF, UHF are line of sight or just over the horizon. So, unless you go to tropoducting, but this is great. So I'm going to send them an email and see if we can get something back from the guys. So absolutely ecstatic about this one, because this really does push amateur radio forward. Now, moving on back to the States, the FCC is proposing changing amateur radio licensing fees. And okay, this today only affects Dan and I. US licensing fees are now going to be charged at $50 for a new license or a renewal.
Well, hang on. Before you say that, this is still just a proposal.
Well, Yeah, but there's
So there may be changes yet before it actually becomes part of the regulations.
yeah, but it's not a phenomenal amount of money though, Dan, is it really? I know the $50 is an emotional thing, but when you think we hold the license for 10 years, that's $5 a year.
Well, right. So, we've been discussing this on my blog and on Twitter and all over. And one guy mentioned that back in the 1970s, and that's when I got into ham radio, there was a fee, and that fee was like $9. And if you go forward now to 2020, that $9 in 1970 is like $57 today. So it's still less than what it was back in the 70s. And it's that $50 is good for 10 years, where back in the 70s it was only 5 years. So it's the $50 kind of hits you, but when you take some perspective, you see it's not such a bad thing.
Yeah, true. And I think we were talking about earlier that people have said, "Oh, what about the kids? Is it going to stop the kids getting into amateur radio?" Well, if somebody's dedicated, I would suggest they can find the money to buy stupidly expensive trainers, can't they, Dan?
Well, that and as one guy mentioned on Twitter, expensive computer games.
Yeah, so I'm hoping it goes through in some ways, because if you pay for your license, you're predominantly getting something for it. If you're given your license like we are in the UK, I always feel that we are now just forgotten about a little bit. What are your thoughts, Leslie?
Well, I've got a little Excel spreadsheet. I have it for these things like this when questions come up like this. And I tapped in £15 because we used to pay £15 a year, £15 a year. That's what we used to pay. And then I did the inflation rates up to 2016. Now, if that was still charged today, if that was being charged in 2016, that would be £34 a year. Well, I'm not quite sure what the dollar pound rate, but as that's per year, it certainly would be a lot more expensive than the $50. I do agree with you, Martin. When you're paying for something, there is a expectation of service, where the idea here is that an internet system where you log on and you wouldn't have to have somebody managing it. It would all be automatic, and therefore the cost would go down. It's only my own take. I don't think that's 100%, but that was the idea. $50. Well, yeah, you're right. Any money that's going out of my pocket, I get emotional about. But that's just my low. We need to look at these things in perspective. For a youngster just coming in, that's a lot of money. But bearing in mind, well, it swings and roundabouts, really.
Yeah, I give you for a youngster just coming in. But normally, if the parents are interested, they will do something to help, or somebody will help. But in fairness, as you say, we were paying the equivalent of £15 a year back in the early 2000s when I got licensed. £34 a day, I reckon that's probably very close to about $40, between $40 and $50 anyway, per year.
And bear in mind, Martin, that the hobby has never, ever been cheaper to get into than it is today.
Correct. Yeah, correct, because the price of hardware is going down all the time. You can't fault it. But the other thing is, and I do give the FCC some credit here, in that they do a lot of investigations, and we do hear what they've actually done in the amateur market, abuse and fixing abuse and things like that. It is my belief that in the last 10 years, from what I've been told, and it's only a belief, it might not be fact, that Ofcom have prosecuted a very round figure of people for abuse. Why? Probably because we don't pay for it.
Well, there is the other thing as well, Martin, is let's say somebody is prosecuted and taken to court. We have like a local magistrates court here. It's essentially a slap over the wrist and 50 quid fine. And it's like, well, that's not going to deter anyone.
Yeah, true.
So, why go down that route if it's not effective? Or if that happens in the States, yes, they do get a warning and all the rest of it. Please stop doing this, but their fines can be very, very heavy indeed, as we've discussed previously.
Well, fortunately, I don't work for the BBC, so I could quote Jeremy Clarkson and say, put them up against the wall and shoot them, but I won't have to answer for that one. Hi. I'm joking, guys, seriously. Edmund, what's your thoughts?
Well, as soon as I part with money for any reason, irrespective of how much or how little the amount is, irrespective of if it is more or less in real terms than the equivalent thing 10, 20, 30 years ago, whatever, the first thought that's going to go through my mind is, what do I get in return? So that would be my question. And I won't mention any names, but I'm a member of various Facebook groups, and I look at certain online internet sites where people periodically will complain about poor operating standards, deliberate QRM, repeater abuse, all the usual stuff. And an answer that can be put forward to the lack of action, the lack of prosecutions, is, well, you can't really complain because you don't pay for a license. I'm not saying that I deem that to be a particularly acceptable or good answer, but it is an answer. People with that mindset, as soon as they start paying, even if it was something stupid like, I don't know, 50p a year or something like that, as soon as they start paying, some people, particularly who inhabit the aforementioned places that I look at online, are instantly going to start feeling entitled and beating their chests about, well, we're paying for a service now. And that could end up being used as leverage, potentially, against Ofcom in the case of the UK. So I do wonder if maybe introducing or reintroducing this charge in the States could actually be a double-edged sword for the FCC. So be careful what you wish for. Back to you, Martin.
Yeah, I hear where you're coming from. And in fairness, it's nice not having to pay for your license, but then I do wonder whether we are forgotten about. We are the last thing on their mind because, let's face it, radio spectrum costs a lot of money, and we have a lot of spectrum for free. That might not be monitored as much as anybody else's, but I was saying earlier is I remember listening to a man and a woman at the bottom end of 10 meters using FM in the CW part of the band and using foul language some years ago. This was some good years ago. And I reported FCC, not the FCC, I reported Ofcom, never heard any more about it. My reason I reported it is not because I'm a killjoy, not because I was embarrassed because I've heard the industrial language and probably used some of it myself. But what I was most incensed about was it's the UK. If somebody hears somebody effing and blinding all over the band in English voice, they're not going to, our continental neighbours are not necessarily going to think that, they're pirates. They probably think this is how it all happens in the UK, and it puts us in a bad light. So that's why I think we should probably, have a bit more enforcement in our bands. Hey, I'm getting off my box. Anybody want to?
Let me throw in one more idea.
Yeah.
So the other thing that this would pay for is the FCC ULS license database, at least the amateur radio portion of it. And in my mind, that is really a fantastic system. I mean, you can go there and type in a call sign and find out information on that licensee. You can, you can search the database different ways. And, that database is really the basis of QRZ.com. Without the FCC licensed database, you wouldn't have QRZ.com. So, even getting that as part of at least as part of the $50, not even thinking about the enforcement, I think that's a good deal. The ULS, and not only does it let you get information on the licensees, it allows you to renew your license just by going online and typing in, hey, renew my license, and it renews it. And it makes the availability of licenses very quick. Back in the 70s when I got my license, you waited 4 or 6 weeks to hear back from the FCC. Now the VEs input all this data online, and you get your license after you've passed the test in 2 or 3 days. So, that's part of what the $50 would pay for as well. So to me, that's not a bad deal.
If you want things to happen, you've got to have money behind it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we're all in agreement on this one. And the other thing is, and I probably shouldn't say this, Dan, but if anybody looked it up on the FCC database, they'd see that I share a house with you.
Well, that's because you need a U.S. mailing address, and I've allowed you to use my mailing address.
That's true, Dan. That's true. And I thank you very much for it.
I haven't. Have I passed on those latest FCC messages to you? I'm not. No, I'm just kidding.
I've been banned. I've been banned, and my license is.
What have you been doing, Martin?
Hey?
What have you been doing?
Oh, bad boy, mate, bad boy. Yeah, no, as I say, thanks for Dan. I do appreciate you acting as my mailing address in the States. So
no problem at all.
Thanks. Right, let's move on before we get emotional about me living with Dan.
I've just fallen off my chair.
I did hear a thump. Never mind. I think this is a great story. I'm going to pass it to Edmund because he does.
I'm going to hide under the table and put my tin lid on.
Go on.
No, I'm hiding under the table.
Yeah, all right. So while he's hiding under the table, Edmund, you go first on this one. ISS 437.8 megahertz crossband repeater is activated. Mr. Rothwell told me about this, but hey, this has got to be interesting, isn't it, Edmund?
Yes, and I did not have the first idea that this was coming. So when I heard about this, it was a very pleasant surprise, and it put a smile on my face. And given the worldwide situation regarding the virus that we don't mention on this podcast too much, and stresses of work and everything else, that was a real positive, pick me up type moment. So the International Space Station since the 2nd of September has had a crossband FM repeater on board, and if you want to access it, you transmit on 2 meters 145.990 with a 67 hertz tone on the uplink, and I think you need to transmit that all the time. It's not just you transmit it once to open the thing and you can then get in on carrier. I think you do actually need to transmit the CTCSS tone continually. And the downlink is in the 70 centimeter band on 437.800 notionally. So when the ISS comes over the horizon, it will be a little bit higher than that because of Doppler shift. So if you start listening on 437.810, somewhere around there, maybe a bit lower, and then decrease the frequency as the ISS comes above you and then disappears off to the horizon. And I haven't heard it yet, mainly because by a twist of bad timing, in the first couple of weeks since this repeater was switched on, the ISS has been coming over the UK either very late at night or very early in the morning. Or otherwise at times when I've not been available. So I haven't received any signals yet, although I have put the center frequency, 437.800, into my scanner, which I switch on at lunchtimes and during my coffee breaks whilst working from home during the week. But when I do receive my first signal, I'm expecting it to be very, very strong indeed, because if you go onto YouTube and search for 437.800, you don't need to type anything else. You don't need to type megahertz or anything about the International Space Station. Just that number on its own, 437.800. At the time of recording on the Wednesday before the release on the Sunday, there are already over 20 videos on YouTube that have been posted since the 2nd of September. And by the time you hear this podcast, there'll probably be considerably more than that. So there's a lot of interest out there. But one guy who's put a video up on YouTube was receiving the downlink using a handheld and the supplied rubber duck whilst sitting inside his car, and it was a rock solid signal. So the downlink does appear to be very strong, and in the weeks ahead the ISS, International Space Station, will be coming over the UK at slightly more sociable hours. So having said a few years back that I would be making my first satellite contact and then failing to go on and do it for various reasons, I think this repeater will be my first ever FM satellite contact, and I've got a feeling that could be coming quite soon. So I look forward to hearing people on there, maybe even your good self, Martin. Back to you.
Well, I've certainly interested, and I started tracking it and watched it come over the other day, but there was nothing going through it at the time. It was 6 o'clock in the morning in the UK, or just after. But yeah, I'm quite interested in this one. But the other thing is that the International Space Station also is, we got this repeater on board. We've got the Russians occasionally send out SSTV, pictures of stamps and one thing or other for us to receive, which is great. I believe there's a APRS Digi repeater. You can certainly track it through APRS. So I think this is something real interesting. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think that's great too. I get a lot of students who are interested in the space station. One guy in particular just recently contacted me, and we've been swapping emails back and forth. His main reason for getting a ham license was to try and talk to the people on the space station. And so far, he's not been able to actually talk to them, but he's heard them communicating, and he knows about this repeater now. And yeah, it's great for interest in ham radio. Another cool thing that we can do as ham radio operators.
Certainly is, and it's something that not only excites youngsters, it excites everybody. So I think on this one. Leslie, thoughts on this one?
Well, first of all, I must apologise, Martin, because I got the script mixed up. But hey, I was going on to the next story, but never mind. This satellite with the International Space Station, I think it's absolutely great. They did a thing when it went over Gilwell Park, and I remember the Radio Society of Great Britain was involved in that, and it did generate an awful lot of interest. And I actually received it. I used an old ICOM W2E handheld, and I was on the top of the 2 meter band, and it was coming through as clear as a bell. So I'm looking forward. Next time we can hear it, let's have a go. That's what I say.
Yeah, I think the ISS and all the work that's been done to get amateur radio gear on there and all its guises that is up there, the chance of being able to talk to amateurs, the chance of doing APRS, the repeater, the slow scan TV stuff that's up there, I think, in fairness, it's a really good thing. So I look forward to welcoming it and working it as well. So hopefully I will get hold of Edmund on it as well. Okay, moving to our last news story, and
this was the one.
This is the one that you can put your tin hat on now.
Oh my God, I'm hiding on this one.
You can put your tin hat on now. This is the one that Dan and I don't disagree. We were discussing this, and I sometimes argue black is white just for the sheer fun of it, to put the other point of view. But I think a lot of you are going to be spitting blood. Brazil are talking or proposing to end all amateur radio exams. Dan, I know you've blogged about this because we talked about it. You go first on it.
Okay. Well, so they're not eliminating qualifications. That's the first thing I want to point out, except maybe for the Class C license, which is the lowest class of license. Because they have 3 classes of license, Class A, B, C. And, I was trying to find out what privileges those classes get, and I actually couldn't find it. So I'm not sure, but let's just guess that it's sort of similar to the U.S., the Tech, General, and Extra. Class C being the Tech, Class A the Extra. So if that's the case, they're kind of they would be giving out the Class C license without an exam. So that's one thing. But to get the Class B, you have to have a Class C license for 3 years or have some kind of academic accreditation. And then to get the Class A, you have to have spent 3 years as a Class B operator or have what looks to be a college degree in electrical engineering or telecommunications of some kind. So the point here is they're not just giving out the licenses. So having said that, I think this is an interesting experiment. What I think of all the time spent on testing and people studying for tests, and I just wonder sometimes whether or not that time could be better spent actually doing something instead of just studying for a quote unquote test. And I say this, of course, as someone who makes money off selling study guides, so that it's directly not in my financial interest to say this, but I think it could be an interesting experiment.
So could it be, Dan, just throwing this one, could this just be an operator's license rather than an amateur radio license as we know it? Operator's license, competency in operating.
Well, maybe that's why I say what I really wanted to do was find out what the privileges granted to a Class C licensee. I'm going to guess it's like a tech class license, but maybe here like we joke here once in a while, techs here can actually operate 1,500 watts on VHF and UHF. I don't know that in Brazil they give them that much power, but I don't know. That might be. The other thing to think about is, what's their fee structure? Maybe they're going to give the license away, but only to people who can pay $1,000 or something. I don't know. But anyway, I think when you get down to it, I think it might be an interesting experiment. And I don't know. See what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Now, Leslie, I know you hold a full amateur license, but
yes, I do. Yes,
in a previous job, you were saying you were an operator.
I was a radio telegraphist,
and you didn't need to know what was in the box.
No, you did not at all.
So, is this kind of maybe where they're going? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. There's a radio operating, which is. What we have is an experimental license. We can try this and we can try that, and we can do all sorts of things. With the radio operators, it's purely a box, normally type approved, and you have a limited selection of antennas. Normally, this is what you use, this is how you do it, and you don't have anywhere near the flexibility radio amateurs do. Nowhere near it. And it's a totally different thing. I can see people, especially of our older generation, spluttering on their tea on this. However, when I go back to the 1980s, some of the things that were being said then, let's just say the mobile phone was £1,000. And I remember the discussion about people owning mobile phones. Now that's changed beyond belief, and if I'd have said at the time, every man, woman, and child on the planet is virtually carrying a mobile phone, they would say, no, that's never going to happen. So, I'm just like, well, actually, guys, this could happen. stop thinking of things as being unthinkable and thinking, well, actually, the hobby's got to progress. Certain things are going to be tried and not work, and other things are going to be tried and be successful. Where this is going to go, to be honest, I don't know, but it is an interesting idea, and that's where I stand at the moment.
Yeah, well, the thing is also, Leslie, when you look at the exam, some of the stuff they teach in the amateur radio exam, the syllabus, and I'm not picking the fight with the guys who write the book or set the syllabus, but it is dated. It is very dated.
Yeah, very, very much so. I mean, if you look at when I did it, they looked upon it on atomic theory. Why? I have no idea. Things change. You don't need to know. I mean, I know people will huffing and puffing about this, but to be an operator, you don't need to know what goes on inside the box. Where you're experimenting, and what the exam does is it gives you an indication of an understanding. So let's say EMC, and you can say, oh, there's an EMC problem. I need to read up a bit more about that. So that's what the radio amateur side does. Sorry, Martin, back over to you just for a second.
Yeah. Well, where I was kind of going is the one part of the intermediate license, which is the same as your general in the States, Dan. We do a setting up of a VFO. It's interesting. There's a simple VFO, and they adjust the variable capacitor, trimming capacitor, and inductor to trim this thing up. Great idea, but unless you're building a QRP rig from scratch, nobody uses that sort of stuff.
No, not at all.
Handy talkies, or walkie-talkies as we call them in the UK, I used to fix them, right? You plug it into a radio test set, you plug it into a computer, and you transmit, and it would say, adjust this two divisions lower to get it on frequency. So you're actually...
Martin, I'll give you an example. My background is engineering. When I started, we had to know mechanical, electrical stuff. And nowadays, all you do is just plug in a laptop, and the laptop tells you what the problem is.
And as we go more DR, software-defined radios, that's what I'm saying. You know, we ain't going to be...
I'd like to pick up an earlier point, and I would agree with this wholeheartedly, that people actually learn more by doing. All that reading the book does is, you've passed a test. That once you've passed a test, that's the point you start learning.
Yeah, you soon let go of the mains very quickly when you get shot.
and see, that's my point. If we didn't waste so much time on testing and studying for tests, and maybe people would start learning faster and do things faster.
Yeah, I think I see some of the things on YouTube and people building things, and I'm horrified at their construction techniques, but they're actually doing things. I can't knock them for that.
And since you brought up the point of the question pools, plays into this as well. If the question pools are out of date, that makes the tests even less relevant. When I teach a class, there's some questions I cover all the questions in the question pool, and when I talk about certain questions, I just have to tell them. I say, you know what, this is a totally obsolete question. You'll never probably ever run across this situation in real amateur radio operation, but it's here on the test. You've got to memorize this answer, because if you get it on the test, you want to get it right.
Memorizing is not the same as understanding.
Right. But some of those questions are just like that, you know. So anyway, that all plays into my point.
Correct. Listen, Edmund, we've left you out in the cold. What's your thoughts?
Well, there's nothing I can add beyond what's been said already, but my gut feeling is that this isn't a good idea.
Well, I try and remain open-minded on a lot of these things. I might argue the other point just to generate a discussion, but I'm open-minded on this. Yeah, somebody has to be the first to do it. Brazil might be leading the way. in what we're trying to achieve. I mean, let's face it, going for a 3-tier license system has been a godsend in the UK. 20 years ago.
And I remember a lot. There was a lot of what was the word I'm looking for? There was a lot of
Snobbery.
No, I wouldn't use that. There was a lot of they didn't want it to happen.
Yeah, but if you look at it,
resistance. That's the word I was looking for. Yes, resistance.
Yeah. But if you look at it, it's opened the hobby up. It's given people enjoyment. We've not become the exclusive elite that are trying to make things so difficult that other people can't get into. Now,
was it a 1-tier license before? Or 1-tier?
Yeah,
system?
well, if you go back to about just before 2000, it was a 1-tier license. In the 90s in the UK, it was a 1-tier license. You went straight to full, and you got, once you passed your written test, you got what was known as a B license, which you were only allowed to transmit above 30 megs. If you did 5 words a minute Morse, you got an AB license, which allowed you 100 watts on HF. And if you got 12 words a minute Morse, you got the 400 watts, the full A license. Now, as Morse got done away with, that's no longer a requirement, and everybody who achieves the full license technical question gets HF. But originally there was a big distinction, and you had to pass it, and regardless of whether you were ever going to do Morse, there were a large number of Morse type and HF questions in the question pool that you had to answer, but then you weren't allowed to operate there anyway, which is
yes,
that's fair, isn't it, Leslie?
Yeah, that's true.
So it's an interesting thing. Brazil, we can watch it.
Yeah, I'm open-minded, Martin. Let's see. Let's see.
Yeah, let's not be elitist. Let's invite people into the hobby. As I keep saying, there are all sorts of branches of radio, and we should be embracing and talking with everybody and getting them involved. And if they have an interest, let's not make it so difficult that they can't get into the hobby. That's where I go on that one. Okay, well, that concludes the news stories. So hopefully something of interest for you guys. Let's find out what the boys have been up to since the last time I spoke to them. Leslie, I know you've been camp.
Oh, yes, I have. I did the annual camp with the Silverthorne Radio Club, and there's 2 mistakes. One is it was organised on a bank holiday, which in this country it always rains. And the second mistake was I touched the tent, and that's also guaranteed to rain. Anyway, on the Friday, the heavens opened up, and I've never had so much rain come down. It was like, what is happening here? The second thing that happened was our gazebo tent flipped up. Well, got a very large gazebo tent, and it's decided to upflip and smash itself into lots of pieces. So we were looking at this mess the next day, and wow, what can I say? However, we did some grand operating, managed to work a friend of mine that I've not heard from a very long time in Bucharest, Y03 IPR, and we had a terrific contact on 20 meters for about half an hour on 20 meters, and it was as clear as a bell. And we also got our new club radio, which is an ICOM 7300, and we got that we got that up and running, and the members were well impressed because that's the first, our kit was not like 1980s style, and we've suddenly gone into all this touchscreen stuff. So overall, it was a great camp, but by the weather was awful on Friday. Over to you, Martin.
Well, at least I think you enjoyed yourself. I can tell from your voice you enjoyed yourself, and I did see the pictures on social media, so that was a good one. Edmund, what have you been up to?
Well, on the 4th weekend in August, which was the International Lighthouse Lightship weekend, I mounted a one-man de-expedition to Shoreham Lighthouse, the local one, and I got a visit completely out of the blue, but a very, very pleasant visit. And Martin M1MRB, Chris M0TCH, and the other Martin M0SGL all turned up on their way back from a SOTA activation. So thank you very much for coming down there and helping me to put my 40-metre dipole up in the air, Martin.
Well, we thought, it was a windy old day on that hilltop, and we thought, what else can we do? We thought, let's go find Edmund and see what he's up to. Hi.
The whole thing exceeded my expectations hugely. I ended up working, I think, about 56 stations, something like that. 5 lighthouses all across Europe, best DX into Ukraine, 1,300 miles away. So it went really, really well. And the reason I'm mentioning that is not because I think that what I did was particularly noteworthy or special or anything like that, but I hope it will serve as an encouragement to people to actually get on the air and go out portable and maybe set up a temporary station somewhere, because there were lots of ways in which that activation could have gone really badly or wrong. I was thinking about this before we started recording the podcast, and off the top of my head, I had thought of at least 6 major ways in which the whole thing could have been a complete disaster or a waste of time. And if I'd woken up that morning and had not really felt like going down to Shoreham Lighthouse, and I'd been trying to talk myself out of it by listing all the things that could have gone wrong, I wouldn't have needed to work very hard to persuade myself that the whole thing was a terrible idea and that I would do much better to stay at home. But in the event, it went like a dream. I parked in the exact spot that I had my eye on. I put the antenna exactly where I planned it. It didn't get blown down in the wind, despite the wind being strong. Miraculously, I didn't get any QRM at all from the nearby broadcast transmitter, and that thing has plagued the Worthing Club in years gone by with QRM. And oddly enough, this is perhaps one of the rare examples where having a more modest antenna setup played into my advantage, because the club typically has a horizontal antenna up very high, broadside on to the broadcast mast, whereas I had a monoband resonant 40-metre inverted V dipole relatively low to the ground and sideways on to the broadcast mast. And I was expecting some QRM or some problems, but there was nothing. So okay, maybe it's the exception rather than the rule, but sometimes having a more modest antenna setup can actually be an advantage. So that was fine. 40 metres was open for the first time in ages. There was not much QSB for the first time in ages. So everything went right, but it would have been so easy for me to wake up that morning and think, there's dozens of ways this could be a disaster, I'm staying at home. And I know it is very tempting to think that way, particularly at the bottom of the solar cycle. But I'm just mentioning this because I would like my experience to act as an encouragement to people out there who might be thinking about going out portable and then are managing to talk themselves out of it. Please don't talk yourself out of it. Have a go. And even if you do it 9 times in a row and 9 times you have a disaster, do it the 10th time. Keep going, because the 10th time could be the one that is your crowning glory, where everything goes right and makes the whole thing worthwhile. So yes, so I hope that will provide encouragement and inspiration to a few other people listening. Only other thing, there's been a bit of a push recently in the UK, well, England particularly, to get more activity on 2 meters FM. Mike Zero X-Ray, Mike X-Ray, the ham radio vlog on YouTube, set up an event a few weekends back now called Radioactive, that was very successful. More recently, Tim, Golf 5 Tango Mike, arranged something similar, primarily in the south of England. It was an event called 145 Alive. So if you go into YouTube and type in 145 Alive, you'll find a few videos. And despite flat conditions, there wasn't any tropospheric ducting that I'm aware of. Lots of people made lots of contacts all across Sussex, Surrey, into Berkshire, Kent, Hampshire as well. Don't think we made the Isle of Wight, but there were a good number of contacts made. I made the mistake, with hindsight, of only taking a handheld, because my logic was, if I'm running 5 watts, it's very unlikely that anybody will be running less power than me. Therefore, in theory, if they can hear me, then I ought to be able to hear them, or vice versa, I should say. In the event, there were a couple of stations running higher power than that, as per their license, and I could hear them, but they couldn't hear me. So my piece of wisdom after the event would be, if you're going to go up onto a hilltop, and if you have the possibility of taking a mobile radio rather than just a handheld, then I would recommend you do it, because if you've got a mobile radio, you can probably turn that down to 5 watts and save your battery if you need to. If all you've got is a handheld and you need to run more power, then you're stuffed. And that's, after that long rambling monologue, Martin, that is all I have to say. Back to you.
Well, what I didn't tell you is you had no interference in that broadcast tower. Martin and I walked across the road and unplugged it for you.
Well,
Not true. Not true.
I hope you were wearing protective clothing when you flicked the switch, because that thing is reputed to chuck out 2.1 kilowatts EMRP, effective radiated power relative to a monopole, and it stands 200 metres away, line of sight, from Shoreham Lighthouse. So you work out the field strengths that we have to put up with when we put the lighthouse on the air. I still think it's a miracle that I didn't suffer any QRM, to the point that when you said that just now, Martin, for about half a second I actually believed you.
Yeah, I was joking. I was joking. For anybody who writes in, for anybody who says that BBC Radio Sussex was off air or whatever station that is, I was joking. Dan, after that, what have you been up to?
Well, to talk to Edmund's point there, I think your antenna polarization was positioning was the key there. I think putting that dipole so that it's in the null there was probably a good thing. Actually, what I did was a combination of both of these guys. I also went out for International Lighthouse Weekend, and I went camping as in combination with that. This lighthouse that I go to is in the tip of the thumb of Michigan, called the Point O'Bark Lighthouse, and it's got a little campground associated with it. It's all in the same little county park there. And unlike Leslie, I had glorious weather. The weather was just perfect. I mean, it was like 80 degrees and sunny both Sunday and Monday when I was up there.
You stole my sunshine.
Oh man, it was like perfect. It was just perfect. And I didn't make as many contacts as Edmund, though. I only operated for about 4 hours, and I operated on a combination of 40 meters and 20 meters. But I only made about 10 contacts. And one of the reasons for that is 20 meters was open, and I could hear Europeans coming in, but I was only operating 12 watts into a rather low doublet, and they just couldn't hear me. I made one contact with not a Yugoslav, a Latvian station, YL2CW, and there was that weekend was also the weekend for the Hawaii QSO party. And I heard one Hawaiian station calling, and I called him, I don't know, must have been half dozen times at least. And he heard me, but he never got my call sign quite right. So I didn't get that contact, but that was kind of cool too, to be able to reach Hawaii with 12 watts with a low doublet antenna. But so anyway, it was fun. But all that DX chasing sort of knocked down my my QSO count. I only made 10 contacts total, and I only was able to contact one other lighthouse. But it was a blast. I still had a blast.
Yeah, well, it sounds fun, and you just said it was, and that's the important thing. So, good news there. Well, I'm ashamed to say, apart from operating from the car, VHF, I've done very little operating the last couple of weeks. There are a number of newbies that are coming up, some of the new M7s, and I worked one this morning in the Crawley area, and he sounded an older gentleman, you know, by his voice, sounded slightly older, quite shy on the radio. And all I keep on about this is my pet soapbox at the moment is work the foundation license holders, or in the States the technicians, if you know they're a technician, because they need the practice. And if they sound a little bit unsure, help them through. And then I worked this guy this morning on the way home. That was good. I've worked a number of them around the Surrey, Sussex area over the last couple of weeks. So there is activity, as Edmund says, on 2 meters VHF as well. Unfortunately, I haven't done a lot of radio, but what I did do was improve my ability to be able to fix radios. And that, for a long time, I've wanted an air compressor to blow all the dust and muck out of electronic equipment that suddenly comes round to me. Computers, radios, anything like that, they're usually full of dust. And that's just a fact. The heat and the circulation of the fans sucks in the dust. I got given an air compressor. Now, the guy who gave it to me said it had a little fault on it. Well, it had a slightly more than a little fault, but that doesn't matter. It was given to me. You don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I managed to fix the regulator, which was good fun. I learned a lot from it, and I've learned a bit about it. But I've got to say, the first device I blew out with an airline, I'm never going back to using spray cans of compressed air. This thing, well, I blew a computer out as a test, and normally, no matter how much you clean them out, the fans always look mucky. You hit this with an air compressed line, and the fans sort of travel at about 90 miles an hour, and they're really going. But it is fun. But I tell you what, the computer looked brand new inside when I finished, and so I was quite pleased. So that will help me as I do more and more of that. Unfortunately, I'm not going to make any of the Sutton and Chi meetings. Don't think there might only be one between now and about February I can make. So if anybody's looking to meet up with me at Sutton and Chi or on the Zoom calls, I'm not going to be able to make them due to shift patterns. But the other thing I did try, and we talked about this, and I sent it out, and I knew about this. I actually made some counterpoises for a couple of my little handy talkies, and I'll tell you what, I fitted it to. I've got a UV3R, Belfang UV3R, maximum output 1 watt, and I was hitting the repeater with that with a counterpoise on, which would normally take me 5 or 6 watts before it wouldn't open the repeater on 1 watt, and I was getting full signal strength back from the repeater, and I was opening it and working through it on 1 watt. So the little counterpoises that you slip under the ARRL connector, and you measure it out for 2 meters. And I got one which is just 2 meters, and I got one with 2 tails in it, one for 2 meters, one for 70 sems. Seemed to work really well. So, Edmund, that's another option when you go out hilltopping. Okay, well, that's just about what I've been up to. We have shortly to follow us an interview with the Rsgb, talking about what they've been up to over the last 6 months during lockdown, and the work they've been doing with the National Health Service in the UK, which hopefully most people find useful. Right, I'd like to thank the guys for joining me. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Thanks, Martin. It's been fun tonight.
Oh, yeah, isn't it? Yeah, I always enjoy these. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. It was a great show tonight.
Yeah, as I say, we've had a bit of a laugh, but it's that's what it's all about, enjoyment. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin. It's been very interesting this evening, hasn't it?
It's been fun. Okay, guys, I'm going to say 73s to you all, and we'll continue on with the rest of the podcast. 73, guys.
Cheerio.
7-3.
7-3.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news here about the 6 Metre group. Their AGM has gone online. It'll be held on video conference on Sunday the 27th of September at 1700 UTC or 6 PM UK time. The formal part of the meeting will be brief, followed by a talk by Peter Lund, Juliet Whiskey 7, Quebec India Alpha, on his recent 50 and 70 megahertz operations from Svalbard, I think it's pronounced, which is the northernmost year-round settlement on Earth and only 1,000 kilometres from the North Pole. Non-members are welcome to join the call, but obviously won't be able to take part in any voting in the formal part of the meeting. To find out information on this, go to uksmg.org, and so you can sign up there and get the connection details, etc. that you need. And now a couple of events that are going on, just to keep you guys active, obviously, as things are still in these changeable times. First off, this month, the Royal Air Force Amateur Radio Society members are operating a special event call station, GB80BOB. It's a special call sign for the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain. It is active throughout the month of September. Following Ofcom's relaxation of requirements for public access for SESs due to the current social distancing, station will be operated from various bases, members from their homes, rather than maybe say from an Air Force base, etc. Operation will be on all bands as conditions allowed, as with single sideband and Morse code as well, and special QSL cards are available. So we'll pop a link on the ICQ podcast webpage where you can get that special event card if you so wish it. And our last event is the EURAO Party for 2020 for the summer season. It's the 80 metre and 40 metre band working party. It's not just a contest, or not really a contest, it's just a radio meeting with a few simple rules, better to call them recommendations, they say. So we'll put all the information on the ICQ podcast website, but basically that's next weekend, 19th and 20th of September. Right, we're going to head over to our features episode. Martin M1LB is finding out about how hams have been celebrating the healthcare workers in the UK. So as always, guys, hopefully you're going to enjoy this very informative discussion. And hopefully, enjoy the feature and let us know what you think of it by going to icqpodcast.com.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, hi guys, for this episode's feature, I'm quite pleased to be joined by three people. Two of which I've met, and unfortunately the third I haven't yet, but I'm sure I will at a Rsgb event. In order, I have Mr. Steve Thomas, M1ACB. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Martin.
There's not many of us M1s around. We've got to look after it, haven't we, Steve?
No, we said before it's a rare breed, isn't it?
Yeah, we certainly are. Also joined by Heather Parsons, who's the communications manager for the Rsgb. Hi, Heather.
Hello, how are you doing?
That's good to have you on the call. And last but not least, Mr. Paul Devlin, G1SMP from the NHS. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Martin.
Yeah, good to have the three of you with me. And today, as I say, let's roll. Guys, and this is maybe to Steve probably to start this one. Despite the challenges in the pandemic, amateur radio seems to be booming quite a bit. And you know, at the moment, it's really taking off. Now, I know you guys have been involved. What's your thoughts on this one, Steve? What's the overview?
Oh, it's definitely taken off over the last 6 months or so, Martin. Just as by way of a bit of an introduction, really, you know that because we've spoken many times before that the Rsgb works extremely hard to support radio amateurs. But we've been part of this huge increase in interest in amateur radio in the UK in recent months. So this is a really great opportunity to share some of those positive things that we've done and we've seen during what's been a really difficult time during the pandemic. So you may have seen my article in the September Radcom sharing a success story. So this seems like a really great opportunity to talk to you and explore some of those things, tell you a bit more about it. But we've seen a tremendous interest, but the pandemic has had a great influence on what we've done in the last 6 months and what we've been able to do. And it started really at the end of March when we asked all of the staff to work from home. But there's been a really big story. But if you'd like me to go through some of the things that have happened to us, and then we can explore all of the great avenues, how's that?
I think that would be a very good move, Steve, because it's always interesting to find out what the Rsgb are up to, or any national society. So, no, it's fair. So, your chance to tell us what you've been up to, Steve.
Okay, well, let's talk about the pandemic situation to start with. So Rsgb HQ is only 10 full-time staff and 6 part-time staff, so 16 people. And we moved them all to working from home from the end of March. That was a big step for us. And this team delivers the membership, the sales, publishing, exams, finance, communications, IT services to all of our membership. But we also manage the Rsgb National Radio Centre at Bletchley Park. And so as well as moving everybody to home, we also closed the NRC as well. That was a big step for us because we had, as you know, over 97,000 visitors last year. But of course, through all of this, the safety of our staff and the volunteers and the visitors to the NRC had to be of utmost importance to us. So we moved the entire team out of the office. As I said, a huge step for us. And it continues to work that way. We've just got a few staff that go into the office just occasionally, pick up post deliveries, that sort of thing. But I'm incredibly proud that we've maintained the service to our members while encouraging and supporting the huge growth in amateur radio that we've seen in the UK during that time. Now, some of those challenges of everybody working from home, we've had situations where we've had to turn like the ground floor of the office into a makeshift warehouse because we were shipping a lot of our books, and we ship a tremendous number of books every week out of the Bedford office, which is completely unusual, completely alien to us, because one of our warehouse contractors had to suspend their business for health reasons. And then we had staff taking deliveries of books at home, but the staff worked absolutely fantastically hard to do whatever it took to support everybody who was interested in amateur radio, either existing amateurs or people that were becoming interested. They were doing everything they possibly could to support those people during the lockdown. One of the biggest things we had to do, which was obvious, which was suspend exams for a while because clubs were unable to hold face-to-face exam sessions. But we then were able to offer remotely invigilated exams a few weeks later, and that's been tremendously successful. Other things we've done, we've launched the Beyond Exams scheme to encourage people to try new aspects of amateur radio, created a new series of weekday contests called the EURAO Party, created a series of live online webinars called Tonight at 8. I hope you've been watching some of those. And we're also planning the special online version of the Rsgb convention this year. Now, I'm sure we'll come back to some of those topics in a moment. I hope we will. But while we were doing all of that, we also decided to launch the largest media campaign in the history of the Rsgb in conjunction with the NHS. So we've had one or two things on the go in the last 6 months, Martin.
Yeah, well, that sounds like you have been very busy. Now, Paul, when I first looked at this and I thought, get on the air to care and the NHS being involved, I thought, what made you get involved to become an Rsgb partner? And after speaking to you today, I now know you have a call sign, but what was the big driving force behind this?
Oh, hi, Martin. Well, initially, about 2 years ago, last May, I took the decision to try and get a call sign as a permanent special event station for the National Health Service. And one of the kind of key objectives of wanting to have an amateur radio station for the National Health Service was to promote health and wellbeing messages across the UK and globally. And part of that was also public health in terms of supporting emotional health and wellbeing of people through taking part in the hobby and the fellowship of the hobby and the science behind it and all those things that we appreciate. So what happened then during the pandemic, that obviously just emphasised the need that communication is key. We needed to help mitigate some of the anxieties and depression over lockdown through communication. And I just pitched to the national team. I'm very fortunate to be working with the national team, the Medicare and Premium Support team at headquarters in London. And I just basically said, something, we need to use all modes of communication, and that includes radio. And they didn't know about amateur radio. They were amazed that 45% of the world's population don't have access to cell phones and internet. So it was pushing against an open door, and thanks to Ofcom as well, and the Ofcom Standards Committee, who held an extraordinary meeting and agreed to issue the only government level department with an amateur radio call sign. And we ended up with GB1 NHS. So I went to Steve and Heather, who I'd met previously, because they kindly helped us launch the NHS radio station at Bletchley Park at the National Radio Centre. And that was an incredible success. So it was a no-brainer for me. I just had to go back to Steve and Heather and say, I've got a little idea here called On the Air to Care. I think it could be a bit of a weekend thing, really, just to do something to support communication, reduce loneliness and isolation. Well, within 48 hours, Steve and Heather had turned it into something that I just didn't recognise. And Heather was saying it's a call to action. We need to do this, that and the other. And we ended up with something that we would never have achieved without those guys' help. And so I just know, going through the Rsgb, we would maximise our opportunity to reach people. And Heather can tell us more about the campaign and how that's gone down. But it's exceeded our wildest dreams. And some of the national directors in London who I've briefed on this, NHS director and board level, are absolutely just staggered by what the Rsgb has done for this campaign. And this will be one of many things I think we do jointly together going forward.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely great. And it is fair to say, well, as much as we are trying to get youth into the hobby, the average age of a radio amateur is pushing on a bit. Let's be nice about it, me included. But in fairness, I think what this has actually done is got a lot of people talking, cut down loneliness, and giving people on the air the ability to know that there are other people out there that care. So a great campaign that the three of you put together. Heather.
Hello.
Yeah, we talk about this sort of information going out in the radio press, and that's great, and amateurs are interested. But in some ways, your role is to get it out into mainstream press, isn't it, or mainstream media, so that to grow amateur radio, to make amateur radio look good.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of my roles definitely is to try and raise the profile of amateur radio in the mainstream media. And as we all know, that's not always the easiest sell. People don't understand it. Even when you explain it, it seems a little bit odd. Or you get the old-fashioned stereotypes of the Tony Hancock routine and all those sorts of things that come out, old men in their sheds, as you just said. So this was a great opportunity for us to partner with the NHS and show the world, really, that amateur radio is so much more than that. And the response from the media, I have to say, has been absolutely fantastic. We launched on 17th of April, ready for linking with World Amateur Radio Day on the 18th. I sent out initially over 100 press releases to the media in this country, but also to our IARU Region 1 counterparts, to the ARRL, people like you and the amateur radio media. And since our launch video and interview that weekend, the coverage has just snowballed. And I would say that amateur radio is now capturing the imagination of the media outlets in the UK. Just to give you some examples, obviously in addition to the great coverage by amateur radio media, as you mentioned, we had a feature on the front page of the BBC Online News, which we know caught the eye of many lapsed radio amateurs who were inspired to come back and who cited that in conversations with us. We've had 8 interviews on local BBC radio stations. We've got more in the pipeline. We've been talking about amateur radio and the campaign on Talk Radio, British Forces Broadcasting Services. Jim Lee, who many people will know, was interviewed on BBC Midlands Today TV. We've had profiles of local radio amateurs in their local newspapers. And most recently, we had an interview in the I newspaper, both in their newspaper and on its website. And that feature alone, we know, had unique views of 1.5 million people. So we know we are reaching people in really large numbers. And what I've loved seeing is how proactive radio amateurs have been now getting in touch with their local media. And instead of being stonewalled or put off, they're now being welcomed onto radio programmes to talk about their experiences of amateur radio. And we even had an example of one of our remote invigilators who managed to get in some information about amateur radio exams when she was just on the radio requesting a song while she was doing her ironing one day. And this new openness to amateur radio stories, I think, is all part of the snowball effect of our campaign getting such prominent coverage, which is great. And those are just some examples of how receptive the media have been and how receptive they continue to be. And it means that when we're looking at our potential reach, which is how many people are likely to have seen or heard the TV, the radio, the online pieces, social media, all those sorts of things, the potential reach is quite significant. We're in the tens of millions. Those are people who may well be amateur radio amateurs, but majority of them won't be. And they're hearing about amateur radio for the first time, which is really exciting. And as Steve said, it's certainly the biggest media campaign we've ever done. And obviously, as the Rsgb comms manager, I'm delighted that the big mainstream media outlets like the I newspaper, the BBC, are coming to us to ask for stories about amateur radio during lockdown. They're asking about our initiatives such as remote invigilation exams, how that's helping people to get involved despite the restrictions of recent months. And as we said at the beginning, all of this is breaking down the stereotypes that amateur radio is old-fashioned. And instead, we're being able to show that people of all ages are interested in amateur radio or wireless communications, which is the other way to talk about it. And that it really breaks down the boundaries of age, gender, location, etc. And as we all know, there's definitely something in amateur radio for everyone. And we're being able to show that, which is really exciting.
Yeah, you're dead right, Heather. And just silly, and I'm throwing this one in as an extra. I stood on a station platform at 6 o'clock Monday morning with some guys and girls. And there was a couple of young ladies there. And we watched the International Space Station go over. I was hoping it would have been broadcasting, but I actually pointed it out and mentioned that there's now a repeater on it and one thing and another. And they were like, wow. So these are the things that sometimes interest younger people. The space side of it. So, Paul, you've taken part in this great NHS event with the Rsgb of Get on the Air to Care. What sparkled your imagination for the NHS, and what's really got the NHS really excited about amateur radio? I mean, do you have an amateur radio society within the NHS or a group like the BBC?
Oh, that's a cracking question, Martin. Thank you. Yeah, so basically, I created the concept of Great Britain One National Health Service and secured that call sign, and I'm the national lead for that. We don't have a club in the NHS, but maybe on probably later into our discussion, I'll allude to something that we will be putting in place to help with an objective going forward. So at the moment, it's just myself. I've had a handful of radio amateurs contact me internally saying, oh, I'm a radio amateur and I work in this part of the country or whatever, and they'd like to be part of what we're doing. But the majority of people that contact me really are outside of the NHS. They're from emergency services or other sectors like that. I'm really surprised, about what is amateur radio and why is the NHS using it as part of its day-to-day business. And I draw the distinction between that, for instance, and say the BBC that have an amateur radio club made up of employees in their in their spare time, if you like, or the GCHQ club is another example of out of office kind of radio clubs. But we've brought it in and we're using it centrally as a public health and wellbeing initiative. So that's really different and really exciting. And I think the thing that sparked it for the NHS is I was asked to support a global health and wellbeing summit. And we had a planning call and people were saying, can we list all the kinds of modes of communication that we would want to use as part of this global summit? And I just listened to everybody, and it all revolved around basically the normal traditional forms of communication we'd expect. Lots of internet and social media and things like this. And when they understood that 45% of the world's population don't have access to that, and I just put the question into our national team, how can you hope to have a global summit when you're pretty much excluding half of the communities we would want to reach? And they were just staggered. They were just, they were Googling it. They go, really? Is that true? Is that true? And then they said, well, what's your idea? And I said, I think we need to run an amateur radio special event alongside this to promote the health and wellbeing summit you want to do. And it went from there. And within a couple of days, I thought, rather than apply to Ofcom for a temporary special event call sign, wouldn't it be really fantastic to be able to get a permanent call sign for the health service? And not only that, to be quite cheeky and ask for GB1 NHS. And I had no expectation they would say yes to that. Their initial comment was, we like the sound of what you want to do, but it's something we just don't do in Ofcom. We haven't done this, and it's not something we would normally do. But I kind of encouraged them to have a little internal discussion, and they came back and said, if you complete this paperwork and submit this letter or whatever, we'll go to our internal standards committee and we'll have the discussion. And 3 weeks later, they came back and gave it. And since then, we've had some great opportunities. We've tagged into the biggest health digital event in Europe, Giant Health, where we had a number of our national directors there, including our chief exec, Simon Stevens. And we got Simon Stevens on our radio station stand on the event, and got a photo of him holding up our call sign. And just doing one or two things like that creates a massive ripple effect in terms of, why is the NHS chief executive standing holding up an amateur radio call sign? What is that about? And it's just gone from there, really, Martin. Ever since that one day when we got the chief exec photographed, it's got really busy for us.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, and it's an interesting one. And I wasn't trying to put you on the spot saying, are you thinking of having a club? It's just a general interest of mine, really. But all sounds good. Steve, we've obviously gone through this lockdown and we're still sort of semi in it.
Mm.
How important was remote invigilation of exams? Because and I'll be honest with you, I was thinking when you first announced it, how are they going to achieve this? Because human nature, people cheat. How do you achieve it?
Well, as I said earlier, we had to suspend exams as a whole because people couldn't meet face to face, so the exams couldn't be invigilated. So we came up with a system using a webcam where we could have a remote invigilator and people could take the exam from home. It was a big step, but it's been tremendously popular. Dave Wilson, who's not only our president but exam quality manager, has been leading this activity. But he's got a team now of, I think, around 35 remote invigilators who have been doing an absolutely fantastic job during all of this time, giving their time. They're all volunteers, giving their time to help people through the exams. And let's face it, some people are sometimes nervous around that time, but they've done a fantastic job. And we've had some really brilliant stories back from the candidates and from the remote invigilators about how happy people have been to go through this. Since we've launched that, and we did it in April sometime, we've run 1,800 foundation exams using remote invigilation online. That's between April and August. So I'm leaving out September at the moment because we haven't got the stats for that. We're in the middle of that now. And towards the end of July, we also allowed intermediate exams to be taken using remote invigilation as well. And in just August, we ran 235 intermediate exams. So what it says to us is that many of those new licensees are extremely keen to progress and go through to intermediate as well, which is fantastic. Those numbers as a whole, though, so 1,800 foundation exams between April and August is probably about 3 times the number we were running, or that we ran last year during the same months. So it's brilliant to see 3 times the number of people coming in, because foundation licenses, of course, coming into amateur radio, 3 times as many people coming in during the lockdown time as we saw last year. It's been absolutely brilliant to do it. So we've loved seeing the people join amateur radio. Now, as well as the remote invigilation, there's been some fantastic work done by clubs and groups who've either created or have extended their existing online training courses. So quite a few groups have been running online training courses to prepare people for the exams. And so they've also done a huge amount to bring new people into amateur radio. So definitely wanted to mention those. As well as the exams, though, we've seen hundreds of people returning to amateur radio who'd previously been licensed. So I don't know if you know, but we often help people to prove that they want to hold a license by providing a scan of the appropriate Rsgb yearbook or core book page that shows their call sign when they were licensed. And so they then take that to Ofcom and reactivate their license. But during the first few months of the lockdown, we were handling 20 to 30 requests a week for people trying to do that, as well as all these other exams. And that's carried on all the way through it. It's been fantastic. That's resulted in so many new people joining, people progressing through the license schemes. And that's, I will be honest, we've had a knock-on effect to membership as well of the Rsgb, which is fantastic. So as well as growth, we're also fueling membership of the Rsgb. Membership currently, as of the 1st of September, 21,628. I counted them just before we came on here, Martin. And that's an increase of over 600 members since April. Now that is a big shift for us. It's fantastic. It's the highest membership that we've seen since 2011. So I think amateur radio is in a fantastic place, and we're doing some great stuff to support it.
Yeah, that's interesting, Steve. And I think people coming back into the hobby, if, and I just see it this way, but it's changed and phenomenal in the last 20 years. Amateur radio 20 years ago isn't amateur radio today. And it won't be in 20 years' time. It's moving. It's live. It's actually happening. And if you were bored 20 years ago doing something, chances are there's so much new stuff, you won't know where to start.
And I think when you're part of it, you don't see it changing that quickly. But I do have this conversation with a lot of these people that want to get their license back. We help them with that, and they say, how can we find out what's changed? Because it looks like an enormous amount has changed. And I usually say, well, the physics is still the same. However, the way you use it, lots of things have changed. So I very often have that conversation with people, and it reminds me that it's an ever-moving target where amateur radio keeps pace and sometimes leads, technology. Let's face it, we've got some great experimentation that's going on in the microwave bands and digital TV and, moon bouts and satellite stuff. A lot of that stuff wasn't around when some of these people were coming back when they were licensed before.
So, Heather, you've been collecting all sorts of news stories over the last few months about amateur radio and what's going on. Do you want to give us the flavour of a few of them?
Absolutely. As we've been talking about, people are coming into the hobby for the first time. They're coming back to it. They're trying out remote invigilation. They're trying different things. And, I've had the privilege of collecting some of these stories, sharing them on our website, using pictures and things on Photo Friday on social media. We've put things in Radcom all across all of our channels. But the one thing for me that strikes me when I step back and look at them all is that there is a common thread that runs through them all. And that is the opportunity that amateur radio gives for people to learn new skills, to expand their experiences, to support their mental well-being, and also to have a sense of community. And, we've seen a lot of young people, both boys and girls, which is good, deciding that whilst they're not able to attend school, they want to learn something new still. And we've shared some of those stories. And in fact, 11-year-old Anne-Marie, who we put forward for the BBC online news feature, She was then profiled on her local BBC Cornwall radio station as their hero of the week because her head teacher at the school during lockdown nominated her for using amateur radio to help support people in her area, which was just a lovely story. And then we've got, going from the 10, 11-year-olds, we've got going through the teenage, the 20s, the 30s, and we've got people, adults who've suffered the challenges of being furloughed from their jobs during lockdown. And they've used that free time and the opportunity for remote invigilation exams to take their foundation exam and get involved in something new that the busyness of work and life had prevented beforehand. And we now see them saying that they're getting involved in local nets, they're starting to take part in SOTA activities as restrictions are limited. And they're discovering a whole new world of amateur radio and it's all its diversity. And then looking at the clubs and the groups that Steve mentioned who have looked at online training, but we've also had groups and clubs who've provided more of a sense of community perhaps for people through local nets and even online club meetings. And we've had reports of clubs who've said that their club membership has boomed during the lockdown because people have been able to access the club meetings in different ways. And this has all helped to prevent social isolation that's been such a big thing for so many people across the country in recent months. And all of those aspects were wrapped up in our original aim of Get on the Air to Care. And we've had such a huge amount of support from radio amateurs and clubs, as well as the NHS and random pop stars and things who've sent us photographs, reports, videos, all sorts of things for use on our web pages and Ragcom and social media. And you can have a look at some of those on our website. The other thing that I would add, which has been really interesting, is that we've been contacted by radio amateurs across the world who've seen news of our campaign and they've wanted to show their support for it. And they've been sharing with us how they've been trying to support radio amateurs in their country as well. And that seems to sort of reflect the wider sense of community that we've got during what is a global pandemic. And we've had Rsgb initiatives like the QSO Hope Party that Steve talked about earlier on, which drew participants from over 30 countries. And the contest committees, I think, in my opinion, rightly won a CDXC Award of Merit for creating a daily on-air activity during this difficult time and encouraging regular involvement in this HF contest by not just UK amateurs, but overseas amateurs as well. So we're looking at stories locally, nationally and globally, all wrapped around radio amateurs supporting each other and hopefully under sort of the umbrella of Get on the Air to Care. And I would say finally, from the stories point of view, it's now exciting that I'm getting stories from people who've passed their foundation license. They're now moving on to their intermediate license, or they're looking at some of our beyond exams initiatives and they're getting involved in SOTA, as I said, and they're starting to expand their horizons and learn more. And so it's not just something that's happened during lockdown and they're putting it away. Now life is moving back to normal, inverted commas. It's something that they're taking on with them and they want to continue with. And that really is the exciting thing.
It certainly is. And you say you've gone out to a number of countries. I know we go out to over 100 countries. Now, be fair, Heather, some of them only have a few listeners. Yeah, one or two. There's some real strange places I would have never have thought would have listened to us, but they do. But the hobby is purely a worldwide hobby, so that's good. That's good, and getting the information out there is good.
I was going to say, as Paul said, there are so many countries that don't have access to standard what people consider to be standard communications these days. And through your podcast, through our campaign, through all sorts of the different types of things that we're all doing, if we can reach people in those countries, then that's got to be a win-win, hasn't it?
Certainly has.
We have membership in I think it's 117 countries when we checked last year, so very similar. But it's fantastic to work with the international members and amateur radio in general.
Certainly is, Steve. Now, Steve, the thing I think you and I have spoken about a couple of times. It's great getting all these people into the hobby. How do we look after them as going forward? And I know you've got ideas on this, and you and I are fairly agreement on this. You've already done the after exam campaign. So what else are you trying to hope that people are going to come up with?
Well, okay. So we've definitely launched a lot of initiatives over the recent months for new and returning amateurs, right? I think it's both we've got to look after. And I think it's not just the Rsgb. I think the whole of amateur radio has got to look after these people. But let me start with just some of the things that we've done recently. And I touched on some of them right at the start and said I'd come back to them. So we've launched the Beyond Exam scheme, and that's really to encourage people to try new aspects of amateur radio. And this is proving really popular with clubs and individuals, both schemes. So we hope that'll encourage people to progress to higher levels as they gain experience. So that's one thing. They don't just come through the first exam and then, what do I do now? There is some things that they can follow. And they're just suggestions of things they might like to give a go, have a go at. We've created a series of online webinars called Tonight at 8. That's to present interesting technical topics. And those, again, are proving extremely popular, not only live when viewers can ask questions of the presenters, but they're also recorded. So people watch them on YouTube later, in fact, usually from about 10 minutes after it finishes. We do the live streaming via not only YouTube, but also via the BATC, British Amateur Television Club website. So we stream on both, and then we publish the recording on YouTube. So those are available to everyone, not just members. And we're seeing a worldwide audience joining us for those, which is fantastic. And we've got some really great presentations, some great questions, and it's done fantastically well. It's working very well. We also created a Facebook support group for new and returning amateurs with some very knowledgeable moderators who are able to answer questions and help to create a safe place for people to ask those questions. And this is going really well as well. Building on the webinars, this year we're going to live stream the Rsgb convention. We're going to do that on Saturday, the 10th of October. We usually do that as a 2-day event in Milton Keynes as a face-to-face event where about 500 people usually come together to watch technical presentations. But of course, we can't do that this year. So we're going to offer 2 live streams on the Saturday. One's going to be called An Introduction To, and the other one's going to be Learn More About. So we're fairly sure we're going to have topics for everybody, whether you're new to something or you want to try something new, or you know a bit more about it and you want to explore it a bit more technically. So those are the things that we've put out, and we continue to look for things. I mean, we've got our series of contests. We've got all of the support that the Rsgb gives for people, and all of the support activities are very busy at the moment. So planning and EMC and everything else that we do is busy supporting these new people that come on and the existing amateurs. So there's a whole range of things that we've got going on. And I might come to an appeal at the end, Martin, if I can, for what everybody else can do to help as well.
Yeah, well, I'd say there's a lot going on, as you said. One of the things I was kind of disappointed that didn't happen or won't happen this year in its normal format is the convention, because I was booked to do one there, and in fairness, I spoke to you, Steve, and said, look, I don't think my chat would go down particularly well as a video chat. I like a live audience, and so maybe we'll do that another year if required. But there is a lot going on. I'm pleased to say about that, and yeah, it's good news, good time.
I have to say I miss the live events enormously as well. The National Hamfest and the convention, Dayton, Friedrichshafen that I normally go to. Yeah. I am missing the face-to-face communications with people no end. So we're missing some of that communication as well. But I'm joining as many of the sort of club video calls as I can. I joined one of your club ones, and there's other ones around the UK that are opening up and allowing people to join those sessions, and they're tremendously useful for building some amateur spirit and spreading the knowledge. They really are.
They really are. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. So we left Paul out in the cold a little bit here, talking about what the Rsgb are doing. But Paul, great things with GB1 NHS. What are you likely to do with it going forward? I mean, are you going to do another event potentially, or have you any ideas?
It's great to just listen to everything that Heather and Steve's saying there, and I'll kick off this kind of response really by just expressing an absolute massive thank you to Steve, Heather, and also Martin Baker, our NRC coordinator, because to be quite clear, we wouldn't have been able to launch a government level amateur radio station without the support of the Rsgb. So that in itself is a historic achievement in its own right. But then to be able to take a very kind of weak idea and turn that into something quite remarkable with the Get on the Air to Care campaign is, in 2 years, the station's been operating in 2 years and being supported by the Rsgb through that period is just incredible. So thank you to those guys. And I have to smile because this is where Heather holds her breath and says, "What on earth is he going to come out with this time?" But no, I think for me, I think we've still got a lot of opportunity to get the concept of amateur radio widely known and understood a little bit by people that aren't involved currently. And also we've got an opportunity to do a lot more good around the health and wellbeing concepts with Get on the Air to Care. And so I think we've got a great opportunity there to scale it up across the UK. And thanks to partnerships now with the BBC and their Make a Difference campaign that we've been allowed to join and be part of across the 39 regional BBC radio stations and also British Forces Broadcasting Service, I think those two partners are going to really help us to get amateur radio really kind of widely understood across the UK and get on the Air to Care out there even further. Interestingly, apologies, I should remember this young man, Steve will tell me, but the Special Interest Group Coordinator at Rsgb,
Simon Taylor,
that's it, sorry. So Simon's really, really keen to support how we can expand the concept of government level use of amateur radio as a concept. So we're going to be working on, and this is an exclusive for you here, Martin, we're going to be working on securing permanent special event call signs for all of our NHS families. So not just NHS England, but we're going to go to NHS Wales, Scotland and Ireland. And our initial special project will be focusing on securing the equivalent of GB1 NHS for the whole of the NHS family and see how that helps in terms of a public service. I think we can also look to international coverage for Get on the Air to Care. We've got the International Red Cross, who are heavily involved in the disaster management side of life, but they heavily use the amateur radio network for their hospital communications resilience teams. So we'll be looking at doing more work with the international aid groups around promoting Get on the Air to Care internationally. And in terms of your previous comment around, well, are we forming a club, then once we have NHS Wales on board, we will have a national amateur radio society for government level healthcare teams. So we can all kind of be like-minded people, very positively using amateur radio to improve the lives of the communities we serve. So that's basically what I hope we can focus on over the next 12 to 18 months.
That sounds really great. At least you've got a good plan. That's a good one. So, Steve, this is the $64 million question. You've generated all this interest and this momentum. How are you going to keep it going forward?
Well, let's start by saying that we're immensely proud of just how much attention we've brought to amateur radio over these last few months, and that we've attracted people to join amateur radio in numbers that we haven't seen for such a long time. And we continue to look for ways to help them enjoy the hobby that we all love. We absolutely do. And I'm in a privileged position to see a lot of the feedback and the stories, the comments, the gratitude from many of those people. And it honestly, it makes this job extremely rewarding. It really does. Amateur radio in the UK has changed and grown over the last 6 months. And the amateur radio community now has a great opportunity to build on that by giving positive support and encouragement to all of those new radio amateurs. So they've just joined, they've just passed their exams, or they're returning radio amateurs. How do we welcome them? We've really got a fantastic success story at the moment. So I'd like to encourage all radio amateurs to work together to keep this momentum going. It can't just be something that's led by the Rsgb or the national societies around the world. It has to be supported by existing amateurs, because we all, as amateurs, all say, we'd love it if more people are joining. They are doing that now. And we've got a very good foothold with the media. They're recognizing amateur radio and the scientific benefits of amateur radio. All of those things. We really want, because we've now got millions of people knowing about this campaign and hundreds, thousands of people joining, I think all amateurs really need to give these folks a good welcome. Now, at an individual level, that means, as you and I have spoken about, Martin, I know, that means individual amateurs welcoming people when they talk to them on air, realizing that they might be making that first contact and remembering themselves how difficult that can be sometimes, how nervous you can be, even if you've been using radio for ages. That first amateur radio contact is something special. So take some time, welcome those people, help them, support them, let them know that it's great that they've joined the community. And I would recommend that, or I would appeal to clubs to do the same thing as well, because there's a lot of people that have joined amateur radio that have not actually touched a club during the pandemic time because they haven't been able to, unless they've joined some of the online sessions. But they've been through with groups and done online training, but they haven't actually met and spoken to people face to face. So clubs, I think, need to welcome those people and think about how they can make amateur radio interesting for those new people that have joined. We're trying very hard with all these schemes that I've talked about just now to give people big things to aim at, the online sessions, the convention, tonight at 8, everything that we're doing there and beyond exams. But it actually comes down to clubs and individuals to give that warm welcome to those amateurs as well as the national societies.
Yeah, we are in agreement on that. One last thing I'm going to throw into the mix, and it's not at any of you, so you can all relax. Guys, when you hear a newbie on the radio, as Steve says, help them. And it could be somebody coming back into the hobby. But lastly, a lot of foundation license holders are so worried that you're going to give them a hard time. I sat with one the other day and he said, "Oh, I'm only a foundation license holder." And I said, "Don't ever say that again. You hold an amateur radio license. Yeah? Don't feel you're a second-class citizen. All right, they may hold a foundation license, but they're on the way to getting to where some of us have got. So, and as long as they enjoy the hobby and it's fun and people, the bigots in the hobby, don't put them off, that's where we have to go. So me off my soapbox now, guys. So it's been a great chat with the three of you. What I would say is, if people wanted to contact you, Steve, how would they do that?
Always through the website, and our contact details are on there. So rsgb.org is the place to go.
Okay, and you'll see Steve wandering around at a lot of the big rallies, as he said. I know we catch
hopefully as soon as we can. That's the big thing.
Yeah, I know. We wanted to go to them as well, Steve.
Yeah.
Heather, is your contact details on the Rsgb website?
Yes, they are. I think if people want to send in stories or anything like that, use the generic comms@rsgb.org.uk email address, and I'd be really happy to have photos and stories. And I think one thing I would add from my perspective, Stephen, you've talked about people welcoming radio amateurs when they hear them on the airwaves, which is absolutely vital. But the other way that people can help to keep the momentum going of people knowing more about amateur radio and understanding it is, if you do social media, I know not everybody does, but if you do, if it's something that you like, if you see our posts talking about the initiatives like Beyond Exams, or we're sharing a story about somebody new, then share it amongst your circle, and some people might share it amongst theirs, and then it gets seen by more and more people. And if I'm sharing something on Photo Friday on Twitter or Facebook about somebody who's passed an exam or somebody who's been out portable for the first time, like the post, share it, congratulate them, just give them some encouragement, because I know I've had feedback from people whose stories I've shared, and they really value that encouragement from people, whether it's from me by sharing it or from people who respond positively when they see it. So you can really get involved in that way as well.
Yeah, what I think you're saying is they We need welcoming into the family.
Absolutely.
Which is the right way. Paul, last words from yourself. Is there a way of contacting you?
Yeah, well, just initially, just a massive thank you to yourself, Martin, for this opportunity today. It's been brilliant to meet you and do the recording. Yeah, so if colleagues want to get in touch, anything to do about the campaign, then it's the comms at Rsgb address that Heather mentioned there earlier. And I'm also on Twitter, Devlin, at Devlin, DEVLINPJ. So very happy for people to link up over Twitter. And if people do want to contact me personally or come through to the mobile, then Heather will always pass people on to me. So that's absolutely fine. And welcome any kind of contact from anybody really who wants to know about the NHS station or why we're doing it or the campaign. And just say to colleagues listening, please get involved. Like Steve and Heather are saying, I think we all need to be aware about the Rsgb 2022 strategy and just pick one or two things out of that strategy to support. And on behalf of the NHS, we're committed to promoting the role of the Rsgb as a society, the National Radio Centre, but also to attract people into the hobby. So there are three objectives really in terms of how we want to make that strategy a reality. But and thanks again to everybody for all your support.
I just wanted to add, Martin, if I can, just my huge thanks to not only Heather and Paul for working with us on the campaign, but the staff of the Rsgb who've been working from home doing a fantastic job, all the volunteers as well of the Rsgb, of which there are many hundreds, as you know, but the training community that have created online exams, all of those people, and the clubs have been holding online sessions, all of those people have actually shown amateur radio in a fantastic light during the pandemic. So just from me, a huge personal thank you for everybody who's done that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you guys have said. And what I'd like to do is thank you all very much for joining me today to record this. And I'm sure that our listeners will be more than interested and extremely pleased, and hopefully you'll get some feedback from them. So thank you very much, guys, for joining me today.
Thanks, Martin.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Martin.
Well, everyone, I really hope you enjoyed our feature there, looking at the way in the UK they're helping to celebrate our healthcare heroes and the work that's been going on there between the Rsgb and the NHS. Now, a bit of feedback we received. Andy Collins, Mike 0, Bravo Lima Whiskey, got in contact with us. Said, hi folks, been a shortwave listener for a few years now and discovered the ICQ podcast about 15 months ago. Between you, Ham Nation podcast and the excellent Essex Ham training course, he's been inspired to study for his licence, and he has recently received his foundation licence in the UK. Thanks for all your help and great show, folks. So that's 73 from Andy M7 Bravo Lima Whiskey. Andy, you're more than welcome. I know the team will echo me when I say, in fact, is the most important thing you do now is to get on the air, get your mic going, etc. And I know you'll be supported by the wonderful team there down at Essex Hams, say friends of the show, and say I know they will do everything they can to help support you as they getting on the air. Now, as always, we'd like to thank our donors this episode. They're the people that keep us advert free. So David LeBlanc, KF7, Juliet Alpha Foxtrot, Scott McDonald, KA9 Papa, and Anne-Marie Nugent, EI9 Kilo Whiskey, for their one-off donations. Those, along with our monthly subscription donors, not only pay our way and keep us advert free, but also allow us to continue to improve the audio on the show, buy new microphones, buy the new recording system we have for the News Roundtable, etc. So everything you can do to help us out is greatly appreciated, and you can do it by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate. I'd like to thank Leslie, Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Edmund, Mike 0 Mike November Golf, for joining Martin M1LB on the News Roundtable. And as always, you can keep updated with what we're up to on the amateur radio hobby to our next show in 2 weeks' time by following us on Twitter at Colin Butler and at M1MRB, and also sign up to our e-newsletter, which you can do from the ICQ podcast webpage. Now, UK Ham Fest would have been due end this month, and as I say, if you need your fix of seeing some of the things that you might have seen in this year's exhibition, you can check out our videos we recorded in the last year's event by visiting our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ICQ podcast. Right, well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this show. As a change from our usual ending, I'm going to make my Mrs. B a cup of tea and find her a chocolate biscuit. So as always, guys, I bid you 73s and continue to enjoy the hobby. 73s 'em.